Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Untangle Ancestral Patterns with Family Constellations. Become a cycle breaker through the liberating wisdom hidden in your lineage. My name is Stephen Dine. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really excited to be with you here, partially because one of the methods that I've been most intrigued with, it's very sophisticated, deep, and powerful, is family constellations work. And it's hasn't always lent itself to an online format like this, but I think we found a way to really bring you the essence of this powerful work from one of the leading pioneers. And so you're going to learn a lot today. And if you want to go further, we actually have a brand new course coming up with her. It's all about cycle breaking with family constellations. We'll share more about towards the end of the hour. So the faculty that we're featuring today her name is Suzi Tucker. She's the co-founder of the Bert Hellinger Institute. She's a writer and a constellation teacher, and is really going to help bring alive this really important transformational lineage. So Suzi, thank you so much for coming here today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
Great. Well, I would love to begin with your journey into family constellations work. What drew you? What opened for you? Why did it become such an important thing you want to devote your life to?
Nothing drew me. I fell into it accidentally and then found myself showing up again and again and again. So I have a background actually in the behavioral sciences as an editor, which I did for about 3 decades and met extraordinary people, love psychology, love writing, love finding ways for people to translate their thoughts into expression. So didn't occur to me to be looking for something else. And then a manuscript came across my desk, partial manuscript came across my desk, which I rejected. And it was a constellation with very little explanation around it, just the constellation itself. And I looked at it and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. Nobody in the field of psychology is going to accept it. And so I went to my publishing partner and I said, can't do this. And he said, would you give it another look? Which he never said to me. He never actually pushed the editorial side of things. So I asked for more material and eventually became very involved in the first book to be published in English in the United States called Love's Hidden Symmetry. And turns out not only did I like the book, but the work itself somehow kept calling me and calling me and calling me. And eventually I slipped out of publishing and into, at first, really organizing for Bert Hellinger and one of his main teachers, and then eventually into facilitation and teaching. And I never made the decision to do, but I made the decision not to leave, is the way I would put it. So I am an accidental facilitator and teacher.
Well, let's that's interesting the way that you kind of backed into it. But let's talk a little bit about the worldview behind family constellations because I think it's quite kind of unique out there. There's a lot of focus on individual psychology and also clearing ancestral traumas from our line. But the way that you sort of see the way things are passed through families and constellated in families is quite intriguing. So maybe you share first a little bit the understanding of what's happening in a family constellation, and then we can talk a little bit about how does that apply in our lives.
So it's both a process and a philosophy, right? And the two work together. And if we do the process without the sort of principles, we may tend to lose sight of the kind of depth of the work. And if we have the philosophy without the process, well, I actually think that's beautiful. I think that works just fine, but it is different. I'll say Bert Hellinger, who is the person who I like to say assembled this work, because there are many different kinds of work that are sort of under the roof of Family Constellations, including NLP. And, you know, he loved Rilke, he loved poetry, he loved opera, and all of it is kind of there somewhere, right? And he began, I think, to develop this work really in childhood, because he was born into World War II. He lost people in World War II. He is German, and he grew up with the sort of unfathomable, seemingly irreconcilable rip in the tapestry of everyday life. And I think he spent the rest of his life seeking paradigm shifting ideas that could help bring together what has been separated. And he defined reconciliation, and I define reconciliation as bringing together parts that have been separated in our systems, right? Meaning back there, translating into our systems, meaning in here. So the work is when you watch a constellation, what you watch is representatives stepping in to represent members, for instance, of your family, Stephen, based on the quandary that you have today. As a facilitator, I begin to look for where you are a mystery of to yourself now, where your behavior and your repetitive thoughts actually made sense somewhere in your lineage. And when I'm choosing representatives, which are people who don't know you, to step in to a relational field and represent great Uncle Marty, to represent your mom, to represent an ancestor who died in childbirth, or an ancestor who was enslaved. The idea is that we begin to outpicture the information that we go by, but we don't know in our everyday life. And the reason it works, I think, well, partly it's a mystery. Bert used to say, I bow to the mystery. I like that. And partly, I think it is on the lowest levels, under the dirt, in the root system. That's where we're connected. We all come from somewhere, and we all carry that somewhere into the future.
One of the things I've heard and experienced a little bit myself, I had one family constellation I participated in, is that the people who are placed in outpictured into these roles often start to be animated by those roles in some mysterious ways. I wonder if you can speak to that a bit.
I know, it's crazy, right? Every time I do, you know, somebody's like saying, I don't know, my shoulder hurts so much. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I wish they'd stop saying that. And then I look at the client, and the client said, you know what, my father had a shoulder, had an accident in which he broke his shoulder. And they tell me the whole story. And I think, well, once again, I bow, you know, in a way, I bow before the mystery. I think the assumption really is that in the collective unconscious, we are connected in ways that we don't pause to recognize. And in fact, you know, if we did pause to recognize, we would be confused most of the time, right? What are we picking up? But when we do pause to recognize it, there's a way that we actually pick up information that we as representatives don't necessarily understand. So to pick it up and understand it are two different things, right? So somebody stands in for my grandfather and suddenly becomes angry. A mild-mannered, joyful person steps into the relational field and they suddenly become angry. They're picking up something that is like a temporary matrix that we have all paused and said, you know what? I will be in service to you. I will let go of my own sensibility, my own personality, my own experience, and I will allow myself to open to a field that I don't know, right? So the answer is, I don't know how it works, Stephen. I know that it does. And every time I am cynical about it, which, you know, my cynicism is important to me, but every time I'm cynical about it, I see, oh, no, it makes sense on some level that I can't grasp.
Mm.
And why should I be able to grasp it? That's actually not my job.
Hmm. Well, I appreciate the humility in the face of the mystery, but and my sense is that it's like part of what you're pointing to is that the idea that we're just holding traumas or challenges by ourselves, it gets fundamentally challenged in this work. That it's like there's more of a larger relational field, a larger inherited pattern that somehow we are participants of rather than just the sole creators of, is part of what I've sort of seen with this work.
Well, I think that's, you just used a really important word here, because I think that when I bring a problem to you, or you bring a problem to me, one of the impressions I'm under is that I created that problem, therefore I must fix that problem. Or sometimes, the ever popular, my mother created this problem, and now she and I must fix this problem. And in constellation, we are fundamentally saying, no, 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 no. We have to open the maps very wide to the information we know in our bodies, but not in our minds. And if we can find a little bit more alignment between the two, we can find. So, what I say I'm looking for in constellation is freedom. Freedom from the old ways, freedom from the old experiences, freedom from the old fields. But there needs to be an alignment between deep information and present information, right? In order to see, oh, there's a rivulet that leads from there to here. And actually, by helping my ancestors, really comes from me living into a future that is different, right? There's a sense of part of my gift to those who came before me is I won't stay caught in the forces that you were caught in. And I will move from survival to thriving,
Mm.
right?
So I love the focus on freedom, and that this whole process is a process of freeing energy, trauma, legacy, things that might have been frozen for one reason or another. What is it about the precision of how the constellation is created that allows that kind of liberation of stuck energy, stuck psychology, if you will?
I think there's a way that when I'm listening for, when I listen to somebody, I'm listening to the facts that back the feelings. I'm not really looking for the I'm not really listening for the feelings. I know the feelings, but I'm looking for the facts that sort of naturally give birth to certain feelings. So let's imagine that let's imagine the truth, because that's the easiest thing for me to remember, right? So I might have complained to you years ago that my mom, I was born into my kitchen table, and at my kitchen table, looming very large, was my mom. My father was absent and my brother was absent. And one of the things I learned really early, probably in the womb, was, oh, I have to take care of this woman. And the way I have to take care of her is I cannot be a burden to her. And I have to be the golden child for her. And I really learned the language of her depression very, very early. If it stayed between me and her, I would have nothing but anger, right? I would feel inextricably connected in my job to take care. And then my anger would go up and up and up because that's in a way all I would have. But if I open the map for my mother, I see that her grandmother, so that would be my great grandmother, died in childbirth. Okay, so she died in childbirth. So her daughter is born at the same time that her mother dies. Right there, right in that trauma, a language develops. And the language has maybe other things for other people, but I think in my female lineage, the language had depress your life force because it's too much and because the guilt is too great. Because after all, your life force killed her. So depress the life force, right? Distrust the life force in yourself and in others. Be fearful. And for me, this language that developed right there at that moment where the earth cracked in a way, and then this language travels down through several generations. And by the time it gets to me, I know the language. I'm fluent in it, right? I'm fluent in it. Depress the life force. Your mother cannot bear it. I'm fluent in it, but I don't know where it came from. Therefore, I don't really know how to cope with it. In my constellation, my reconciliation, my actual beautiful resource is my great grandmother in the arms of my great great grandmother so that I can release something and reclaim something. Every constellation has that quality, release and reclaim. Find out where the language was broken, became narrowed, and then allow it to expand again.
Hmm. That's beautiful. So there's a deeper resource that's available if you go far enough down, far enough back into the pattern that was sort of the broken language, as you're saying.
Absolutely. So we don't have to keep returning to that traumatic moment because there's something bigger than it.
Hmm.
Right?
So the traumatic moment kind of flowed out of these sort of contraction of the pattern, the story, and then we want to kind of go back to before that contraction happened.
That's right, because we otherwise we keep sort of fortifying it in a way,
Mhm.
and we fortify it with our own language in the sense of how we explain things to ourselves, right? So I talk a lot about language because we talk to ourselves constantly, right? So if you imagine this, again, going back to this great grandmother who dies in childbirth, by the time it gets to me, I have a sense with my own mother that I had to do too much, as a little girl in a way, and I didn't get enough. And whose sentence is I didn't get enough, right? First of all, it is grandma's sentence because her mom dies when she's born, so of course she didn't get enough. And the problem with the sentence I didn't get enough is that when I turn to the world, it immediately flows into I am not enough,
Mm.
right? If I didn't get enough, I must not, what it means is I am not enough. So the language contracts and then stays contracted, right, through the generations. So I want to go back to the deeper heartbeat in a way and not deny or minimize the trauma, right? But actually establish that there are folks back there who can take better care of the great grandma than I can.
Mhm. So how so paint the picture a little bit of how this set of recognitions you just shared would could have flowed out of a constellation. You would put different people in place, and then you're kind of investigating backwards to into the lineage to find the source. Just paint the
So,
picture a little bit more.
so I ask a question. So I ask what it is we're looking at, right? And person has a question, and I always say, they never have. It's never going to be the first time they've ever asked this question, right? It's going to be a chronic question, like I always succeed in getting the job, and then I can't follow through, and I make sure to mess it up, right? Or I can't hold on to my money, or I can't make money, or I'm insanely jealous of my partner who has never done anything as far as I know, and yet I see things wherever I go, right? I see reasons to be suspicious. So for me, this question that the person has had probably, some version of it from birth, doesn't make sense here. And in fact, gets in the person's way when they're trying to live their lives, right? Their aspiration is at odds with their feelings about themselves and their feelings about the world. So I begin to ask questions. And they seem like odd questions because you're talking to me about your bank account and I'm asking you about your father, right? So I'm beginning to look for the carriers of the language that you are now carrying. And I'm beginning to look for not mean people, not weak people. I'm really beginning to look for what happened when. When did the armies march in? When did your family have to leave Poland? What did they take with them? And what did they leave behind? So I'm looking for really what happened. And then I'm beginning to populate our image with the people who inhabited that time. And I'm beginning to find ways to relieve some of the pressure that you carry physically, emotionally, spiritually, and put it out there, and then begin to interact with these people. Begin to release something. Great grandmother, I feel a lot of contraction. I'll borrow your word here. Every time I move toward life, I feel contracted and it stops me. Great grandma, is this somehow related to you? Ah, of course it is. I can feel it when I look at you, and I can feel it when I think of what happened. I'm going to return your part to you. And when a sentence like that comes up, I'm going to start populating behind this great grandmother so that you, as the client, gets to see that you're not leaving them alone, that you are leaving them in the arms of people who can carry them, right? So that's the kind of, a little bit of the release, right? And then I'm going to sort of make a new vow, right? I'm going to begin to toy with the idea of taking my place in a different way. And it might sound something like, in constellations, we have seed sentences. Some of them were written by Bert Hellinger long ago. Some of them have been written by me. And facilitators and clients will find their own. They're very simple. They're always very simple, right? Something like, I agreed to my life as it came to me. If you just hold that sentence for a moment, I agree to my life as it came to me. And you feel kind of the energy and the depth of that sentence, and you imagine that you are speaking to your ancestors in Poland, some of whom didn't make it, some of whom left, and you are speaking to your mother and your father. And maybe you're even speaking to an older sibling who died young, right? This sentence, I agree to my life as it came to me, is a paradigm shift because it moves me from here so that I can embrace, and it orients me toward the future. Many of us are very lost in, I do not agree to my life as it came to me,
Mm-hmm.
which means we stay in the back fields. We don't get to go forward then, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we have to feel free and safe to be able to begin to hold that sentence.
Mm. So yeah, it sounds like in many ways you're not attempting to so much shift or change or the history you inherited, but you're just plugging more deeply into the root systems of it so that you can move forward with it integrated.
That's right. I definitely not trying to change it because there is a way in which I think we just, stumble all over the place trying to change our histories, trying to change our parents, and what does that mean? When I'm doing that, it means I'm waiting.
Hmm.
It just means I'm waiting, right? And the imagining is that actually it is my actions in a way that allows the history to be different, right? It is actually my actions that allows the ancestors to rest in a way, right?
Beautiful. Well, Susie, there's so much wisdom in what you're sharing already, and I also know you want to give us an experiential taste of this work for ourselves. And so, do you want to lead us in a guided reflection that helps do that now?
I can do that. Yeah. I was thinking about it and I was thinking that I actually will start and may I just explain one small thing?
Sure.
Uh, one small big thing. Um, when I talk about the first constellation, and I actually begin with the first constellation as a demonstration in every workshop that I do. Um, and the first constellation really begins in our mother's womb, because in our mother's womb, we are taking in nurturance and information simultaneously. And we actually cannot parse which is what is healthy, what is not healthy. We take it all. So I'm going to guide you starting right there. I'm going to ask you to think about, maybe not to think about, maybe that's really it. Don't think about. Just imagine where you were, where your mom was when she was sheltering you, when you were most vulnerable and learning at an extraordinary rate. So we are getting bigger and we are learning and we are completely dependent. And we are learning not only about the surroundings of the particular womb, we are learning about who was there before. Were there siblings before? Will they be there when we arrive? We are learning about our mother's relationship to the world, to herself. Can you imagine what it is she said about her father, her mother, Can you imagine what she feels about your father, her partner, or about others in the room with her? Is she safe? Is she confident? Is she joy-filled? Is she worried? What is it that you are learning about her relationship to the world, and therefore your relationship to the world? What are you learning about what your task is going to be once you are released? What are you learning about her relationship to you? Are you the miracle child? Are you the one on whom everything rests? Or perhaps are you too much? Is it too much for her to imagine what it's going to be like to care for you? What did you learn in the womb that you actually have not had an opportunity to unlearn, but in fact likely got reinforced at that kitchen table? How long have you taken care of someone bigger than you? When did you learn that everything rests on you? And what do your experiences right now at 25, 37, 42, 58, 69, 80, what do your experiences right now have to do with what you learned in your first shelter, the womb of your mother? Have you actually been born and then born again? Have you actually released the tasks that you learned there? What do you know about your history that you don't know in your mind, but you know in your body through her body? What do you know about the grands and the greats? And how much do you carry out of loyalty to them? And can you imagine that there are ways to release some of those burdens and exchange them for gifts? I'd like you to imagine one more thing, that there is a part of your mom who perhaps asked too much for you, who asked too much from her little boy or her little girl. But there is a larger part of her that got quieted, that actually is so proud and amazed to imagine that you could be part of her fruition and not trapped in the ways that she was trapped. Can you imagine that it's time to leave again? And this time to leave her in the arms of the beautiful and powerful others, and let yourself go deeper into your life so that she can actually see the world through your eyes rather than you having to see the world through hers. Can you imagine? I think our imaginations are often used to hurt us rather than to help us. And so this sentence or this question, can you imagine, for me is at the heart of every constellation.
Mhm. And that sense of imagining, opening new pathways, it sounds like. Hmm, beautiful. Well, how do you recommend we continue with that? What started to open with that inquiry there?
I think we move out of the limitations. There's, I always say, when we look at our parents and our grandparents, the close ones, when we look at the close ones who shoulder a lot of our blame and who do in some ways, we belong to their belonging. And so if we can begin to understand their belonging, we can begin to see ways to move out of it. And I think I like to think that, when I teach, one of the things that I'm doing is getting people curious again, more curious about themselves, less settled into their feelings of deficit and stuckness, and more curious about where new content is, not from others, not from advice, but actually inside of us already, that needs to be awakened, that can be awakened. And that awakening, really, again, going back to the idea that our gift to our ancestors is to awaken ourselves oriented to the future, not oriented to the past. I don't think we were born to replicate. This title, Cycle Breakers, right? I always think, right, like my image is, Stephen, that I am going to gently untease the circle or the cycle and shift from cycle to sequence. And a sequence, the moving deeper into our lives, is a sequence rather than circling back and trying to do it over again. Again, in a constellation, we're looking for the ways to do it because it's different for you than it is for me, right? And one of the things that when I sit with you, Stephen, and we talk about whoever we talk about, my advantage over you is not that I'm smarter, certainly I am not, but my advantage is that I can be mobile in your system because I'm not afraid of the same people or consequences as you are. I don't love the same people. I don't feel loyal to the same people, but I see them and I see how they impact you. So I can actually be courageous is not quite the right word because in a way it is, I am interested and curious. I am interested and curious. If I can tell you just one quick little thing. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I grew up in my mother's womb, really discounting my father, not hating him, because that's a way of counting him, but really dismissing him, discounting him. And when I met Bert Hellinger, I thought, great, another old man, another old white man to work for. And I kind of felt, I mean, I really sort of felt like, yeah, in a lifetime of searching for my father, here he is again, right? He's quirky, he's intelligent, he's charming, he's all the things, And the thing that Bert really opened for me was that he turned me to my father. And in doing that, I freed me from a pattern of replication. And in a sense, the two ways, I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but the two ways that kind of happened was getting to understand that I knew my father through my mother and only through my mother. And out of tremendous loyalty and love for her, I carried that lens for decades, for most of my life. Once I really started seeing that, and I could see that they're in this field, and I should be in this field, right? So the movement into this field had to do with releasing her to her own perception, her own experience, her own observation, her own relationship, and beginning to find my father from my field. The other part of that was to begin to understand and really, just like a veil drop, like boom, heart opening, like my father's habits, which were difficult, they had impact. He had a very hard time staying. He gambled, all these things I could say about him were actually for me a navigational tool that was picked up from his family of origin and his ancestors that had a whole lot to do with being Jews in Hungary. You don't stay in one place because then you die. Gambling is a sort of on your feet, live and in person, not staying way of getting something, right? For me, this is all survival language. And now I could say two things. Dad, that had an impact on me, and it hurt. And I understand that it wasn't about me. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was that you were trapped in a language of survival, and thriving was not in the offering, right? Those two ideas began to be embodied by me, and I could become free enough to love him. I don't think I would do this work without my father at my back, actually.
Hmm. I'm really struck by that transition you made with like moving from meeting your father through your mother out of loyalty to her to meeting him directly through this work, and that's a really great metaphor for how our whole ancestral lineage that we're loyal to the patterns that we've inherited, and because of the beings, we love those beings, and we want to sort of, you know, take on their worldview and their language, and but then actually that creates a barrier to the direct experience.
Right? Who is it who said, I don't know, I can't remember who said this, but somebody said we tend to trip over obstacles that are behind us.
That's a great way of seeing it.
You know,
Well, Susie, there's so much depth and nuance in what you're sharing, and I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about your upcoming course, which is an amazing way to really harvest some of the powerful insights and practices from this important lineage of family constellations. So let's do that now. So we're really blessed. It's the first time we've offered anything from the Family Constellations lineage for Shift. So I'm really excited about it because I do see it as a really important work that is game changing, groundbreaking, and liberating in different ways. So the course that Susie's going to be teaching is called Cycle Breaking with Family Constellations: Untangle Ancestral Patterns for Profound Intergenerational Healing. You can find it at the URL familyconstellationscourse.com, familyconstellationscourse.com. It's a 7-week program. You don't have to have any background with family constellations work. So Susie will just take you from square one to really illuminate the deeper philosophy and practices in a way that can really apply in your life. So Susie, I'd love for you to share some of your intentions for what people will come away with, and then we can go through the modules and give a tour of what's coming.
sure. I think, this is really the first time I've ever said this before, so I love that. That I really, a huge part of my intentions are very basic, because in a way I know that students complete the course in the ways that they do, right? So I'm not prescriptive, but I do really like to ignite curiosity. I think that people really become settled into almost like, if you can imagine, like really settled into their issues and feel that they are, I'm just this, and kind of give up or surrender or resign to things like lack of capacity to change. So I really, for me, it's a wonderful opportunity to ignite curiosity about what it would take, not inside me, but actually through me, right? To travel a little bit lighter in the world, to be more generative in the ways that I would like to be, and to find some, excuse me, meaning and joy um, in the present and in the future, and to begin to allow that to be my gift to my descendants.
Beautiful. So, module one is called Reflect on Your Childhood Kitchen Table to uncover the connections of your hidden legacies. Want to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Just really quickly, I think about who was there. Where were you? Were you the only other person aside from your mother and father, or mother or father? Were there people there who were not supposed to be there? For instance, step parents, only not supposed to be there in the sense of, isn't my mother supposed to be here? Isn't my father supposed to be here? And are there people there? Are there people not there who are supposed to be there? For instance, siblings who died early. Are we sitting with ghosts? And what impact does all of this have at our most tender moments? And how do we learn to belong to that original kitchen table?
Module two, stop waiting for others to change so you can release the family burdens you're carrying and plan the future you want.
So this is, at the heart of constellations, and this goes back to Bert Hellinger. I don't always know, I don't always remember what goes back to him and what's mine because I've been living into this work for a long time. But this was his kind of cornerstone seed sentence, which is the right place is taken, not given. Meaning that as long as we are waiting for others to change, what we are doing is waiting. So taking our place is, and I said this earlier, is a great and extraordinary relief, even though we learned early on that it was not allowed.
Module three, free yourself from family entanglements to restore balance and claim your ancestral gifts.
So this is a real, emphasis on release and reclaim. Release what doesn't belong to us because we're really not good at carrying it. The burdens we carry that are not ours are the ones that drive us crazy. The ones where we think we're crazy, the ones where all we're left with is anger and frustration, and to reclaim the actual beauty of our lineage. I describe my father being a Hungarian Jew. Well, there is a difficult aspect to that, but there's also this gorgeous aspect to it that I really learned about myself and kept saying, of course, of course, of course. I love textiles. I love bread. I love certain kinds of music, like literally reclaiming our content.
Hmm. Module four, restore balance in your relationships to reclaim your rightful place in the flow of love and belonging.
So this is a fun and tough module because it's where we really look at what's out of balance in our current lives and why it's out of balance. So I tend to think of things as not bad or good, but being imbalanced or out of balance. And, when I feel that I didn't get enough from my lineage, including my parents, and I feel that I am not enough for the world, for instance, I'm going to likely ask too much of the people around me, and there is going to be an imbalance that is destructive. So we'll be looking at really what is in good reciprocity and what is not.
Module 5, release the systemic sentences you subconsciously repeat to yourself so you can leave behind behavior patterns that keep you trapped.
So systemic sentence simply means the sentences that are passed down through the generations. So, here's a popular one that comes to my workshops a lot. The sentence of, I am afraid to be visible. I'm afraid to be visible has all kinds of impact on us. Whether we actually want to be opera singers and can't go for the audition, or I can't stand up to my partner, or I can't ask for my raise. I'm afraid to be visible has huge present impact and often can be tracked to a place where visibility was dangerous. So we carry that idea, even though it's at absolute cross purposes with everything we want.
Module 6, create seed sentences to shift your inheritance and transform the legacy you pass forward.
So seed sentences are sentences that meet, in a way, the systemic sentences. They are what comes if we no longer carry the systemic sentence. We actually want to be able to carry something new. I've dubbed these seed sentences. Some people use healing sentences or different things. For me, it is a seed sentence, meaning this sentence, which I gave you before one, I agreed to my life as it came to me, because that's a seed that I plant in the ground that actually comes up in ways that I no longer can predict. I can predict despair. I cannot predict joy, right? So the seed sentences are sentences that are both attuned to the particular system of the person. And also there's a shared quality in the sense that when I say them, everybody can understand them.
And then module 7, take your place as a future ancestor as you reclaim your strength, confidence, and creativity.
So for me, my responsibility as an ancestor is a beautiful responsibility. I don't feel it as pressure. I feel like, life came through my parents, not from them. And life comes through me, not from me. And the better I can do it, meaning the wider I can spread my wings, the less the future has to carry on my behalf, and the more fruition they will be free to meet. For me, descendants are not just biological children. There are students, our patients, our client, anybody we touch, right? And that there is something amazing to imagine that I am significant enough, because so many of us see ourselves as insignificant. I am significant enough to make a difference to what happens next. And this module may be more important now than ever in my lifetime.
What a great way to close. Well, what a fascinating and important program you've created here. So we're really blessed that you've agreed to do this. And again, there's more detail on each of those modules at familyconstellationscourse.com. In addition to those 7 90-minute live sessions, you're also going to have a chance to ask your questions live. You're going to get recordings, both video and audio, for every session, as well as word-for-word transcripts. And there's weekly practices you can do at home. There's a community group to support you and deepen your experiences And there's also a number of extra bonuses that Suzi's been very generous in adding to this course. There's a live video teaching called Join a Live Experiential Conversation of Your Choice, sort of a demonstration there. So, Suzi, you want to share more about that?
Yeah, those are 4 hour classes, 4 hour encounters, maybe is really a better word, in which we look at a theme, a theme like the next one is actually Go Ask Your Father. There's one called Mother May I, there's Money Matters, there's codependence, actual themes that are present for most people on some level. And we kind of look at them through the constellation lens. So rather than looking at the constellations themselves, we are talking about exploring each theme through the constellation lens.
What a cool offer to have a 4 hour experiential conversation like that. So that's just one bonus. And there's a second bonus, which is an ebook by Suzi called Gather Enough Fireflies. There's more detail on the page about that. And then there's one final bonus that you get if you sign up by midnight tonight, which is a full audio teaching called Peace Begins in the Soul that Suzi has created. You want to share a little bit more about that special bonus folks get today?
Yeah, peace begins in the soul is something that Bert Hellinger said very early on, and I think again comes directly out of the time that he was teaching and now has so many meanings. And it really is this idea of capacity and significance. And this is a kind of what I call experiential reflection. You might call it a meditation. I have a slightly why have I used this word experiential reflection? Because I think of myself as being actually in conversation with people as I offer it. And my hope is that the work is something that you can begin to loosen some anxiety and fill in those spaces that uh, had anxiety with something like peace so that you can travel lighter in the world.
Well, it's a beautiful extra bonus and a great reason to sign up right away. Again, that's Peace Begins in the Soul audio teaching. So we've kept the investment for this program very accessible. It's just three payments of $128 or save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to start October 15th and run Wednesdays at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings, the transcripts, and the community as well. Some beautiful testimonials on the page from people who have really just raved about Suzi's work as a teacher and facilitator and thinker. So you're in really good hands, and you'll get this transmission of a very important set of body of teachings and work, like from one of the permanent leaders of it. So Suzi is really here to support you in transforming your relationship with your ancestral inheritance in a very powerful way. So again, it's all at familyconstellationscourse.com, familyconstellationscourse.com, and you'll get that special bonus when you sign up by midnight, which is Peace Begins in the Soul. So Suzi, fascinating hour. I really love this work, and your insights are really illuminating. So thank you. And anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering doing the course with you?
Oh, everything. um, I I really look for, I'll tell you what I really look forward to. I look forward to the collaboration with other folks who have curiosity and um, some level of optimism, even when they think they don't. Because there's something that I teach and I love to teach, but there is a way that these groups come together and teach one another. And I think that there's something so miraculous, ordinary, miraculous in the way we move from the first week into the last week, with this sense that we have actually gotten on a magic carpet and taken a ride somewhere, and we arrive Sometimes I think that we spend our lives trying to escape certain things. And I think family constellation is really about arrival. So, what's on my heart is let's arrive together.
I love that. Let's arrive together. Well, Suzi, you're a profound thinker and transformational leader. So thank you for what you've shared today. And thank you all for joining, and see many of you in the upcoming Family Constellations course.
What a fabulous conversation. Thank you, Stephen.
All right, many blessings.